Hello.
Hello. Or Jeffrey.
Yes. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
It's so hot. I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, I
Did
think
you
right now
know-
it's 245 degrees out.
Did you know there is such a thing called a fire tornado?
I saw something
Oh
about it.
my
I didn't
God.
click on it
I
because it
was
seems like something I don't want to know
I'd be
about.
terrified about.
There was the derecho also in like the Midwest last week that had like crazy winds and
Also, Death
it's
Valley
not looking
hit a
good.
record 130
It's not
degrees.
looking good. It is
We're
not
doing
looking
great,
good.
y'all.
It is not looking good.
Stay inside.
You look good
I
though.
think that's the theme of 2020. Just stay inside.
Yeah.
Don't go out. No, that's bad. You should go outside, but
Yeah,
within
at the right times.
At the right times, yeah.
Get some exercise if you can, and
Oh, I
some
can't
fresh
wait
air
to
when you can.
use the hammock when it cools off.
Oh, it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really gonna be great. A little bit of breeze,
Yeah.
some music. It's gonna be very, very relaxing. I don't want it to become fall because I like to use the pool.
Yeah.
But I do want
yeah.
it to ebb off of this crazy heat wave. It's too much. I can't go out there.
Yeah, it'll be nice because, so like, unlike Michigan where September it's like you have to wear a jacket already, we'll still have like some residual summer to use the pool a few more times.
My family asked me last year when we moved here how late we used the pool in the year, but I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe
remember
into
either.
October, but not much after that.
No,
Yeah.
for sure, no. I can't wait for it to rain again here.
Yeah.
All right, enough about weather. Let's talk about the weather. Complain about the weather forever. What else?
What are your feelings on snow?
Snow.
Just kidding. Yeah, not much.
Yeah.
Not much. We should just get into it.
Yeah,
It's going to be a
let's
good
go.
chapter, I feel like.
Yeah, there's lots of little things that happen.
Lots of mini scenes. Those
Little,
are always
yeah.
tend to be long episodes for us, so
All right.
let's hop in. Juan's ready. Turn to page 141, The Flight of the Fat Lady. Today's lesson is called Protected from Harm. There's a theme in this book for sure. Brief synopsis. The chapter begins with the students engaged with Lupin as their new teacher, so much so that Malfoy barely finds any purchase while trying to insult him. Quidditch is a welcome relief to Harry, who is still flustered by being denied his encounter with the Boggart and is frustrated by being denied the opportunity to visit Hogsmeade. During his isolation, Harry encounters Professor Lupin, and they discuss Harry, the Boggart, Lord Voldemort, dementors, and fear, as well as whether Lupin should trust the potion that Snape made for him. Hermione and Ron recount some of the highlights of Hogsmeade while trying to avoid making Harry feel worse. When they stumble upon the entrance to the Gryffindor Common room, the portrait of the fat lady, attacked, apparently by Sirius Black.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I had to go back to see what you call the chapter, Protected from Harm. So one of the things that made me laugh at the beginning of the chapter was, so Malfoy is, like, everyone loves Lupin. Everyone does, except for Malfoy and some of his Slytherin friends, and he's, like, trying to insult Lupin. I don't know. I was like, wait, did I say Sirius or did I say Lupin? I feel like I was confusing their names in my mind. Lupin, by saying he dresses like our old house elf.
Right.
And it made me LOL because I was like, haha.
The Dobster.
Dobby is a free elf.
Yeah. He doesn't tell the truth about how Dobby became free, I can tell you that much.
Oh, yeah. It's
tells
probably some
everyone that he's
dramatic
dead.
story. And just, yeah.
Yeah. Protected from harm. I don't know. I mean, I was just thinking about how, like, I kind of was thinking earlier about the scene from The Dark Knight when the Joker is talking to Two-Face in the hospital, and he's talking about, like, how, like, there are calculated risks in life, right? And I think that's a big theme that we're dealing with now with COVID. Like, how do you deal with calculated risks, and when does it become like these uncalculated risks need to be acted upon, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, with Harry, there's always a lingering question in this chapter, which is, does McGonagall sign the paper if Sirius Black isn't in the equation, right? Does she give him, because clearly they can. They clearly can, right? It's not like Harry's going to sue them I don't even know if there are
The
wizard lawsuits.
Dursleys are going to sue them and be like,
They're not even
"Excuse
going to know.
me."
Right. So they
'Cause
clearly
care so
can.
much.
Dumbledore could. They know the situation. Are they using it as an excuse, right? I think yes. But I think like it's a useful one because it's like, well, all the other kids are going to Hogsmeade. It's not like the risk is high enough for in general
Sirius Black
that Sirius Black is out. So like,
yeah.
but they mask it, right? So Harry keeps getting protected and he's frustrated by it because he doesn't agree with being protected from harm, right? And then when you juxtapose it with Quidditch, which is in itself a dangerous game, like clearly there are calculated risks that are somehow acceptable and others that are not.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I was going to comment that we've talked about the adults trying to protect Harry in other books, but this one is more directly a threat or a named threat against Harry Potter rather than like the first one was just kind of like, oh, you find out like through the course of the story that there is actually a threat to Harry. The second one, Chamber of Secrets, like, yeah, kids are missing. Because for that book, I was like, all right, y'all, what are you doing? Close the school down. Like, stuff is happening in your school. Students are being taken. Muggleborn are being taken. And then Ginny Weasley gets attacked. Like, I'm sorry. How do you keep the school open through that? But that one wasn't specifically towards Harry. But this one is, which is a little, like, it's a little different, but also it doesn't make it less frustrating. And particularly what Harry thought in the beginning of this book, saying like, I've already like faced the Dark Lord multiple times now. Like, what is this? Come on, people.
It is quite fascinating that right now school closures would be such a relevant topic to be thinking about. But yeah, it's just something that lingers for me.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little bit about what I researched. So it's a lot, but I thought it would be fun to just think about portraits. I know it comes later, but it's the title, so it's not really relevant.
I looked up the fat lady, so this
Okay, it's not really relevant to the chapter, but I thought it would be a good time to just talk about portraits. I don't think we'll have another portrait as a chapter title for the rest of the series. Okay, so portraits are just paintings, but they're magical. And so the magical portrait is sentient due to enchantments placed on the portrait, usually by the painter. So sometimes it'll be able to use the subject's favorite phrases and imitate their general demeanor based on how the subject appears to the painter, which I thought was quite fascinating. So there is not a intrinsic truth to the portrait. It does not capture, like, remember our conversation last episode about like the Boggart and the mirror, the portrait also in that category to some extent, but it's from the painter's perspective of their subject.
I think that's probably also connected to portrait. I was thinking about self-portraits, and so like I was thinking about Lockhart in particular, and how like Lockhart would draw a portrait of himself versus how someone else might draw a portrait of Lockhart.
Yes, exactly. So the portraits are limited in what they can say or do, which is interesting. So there must be like very good painters, sometimes. They can move portrait to portrait, which we understand, and they can also visit portraits of themselves elsewhere in the world. So that's quite interesting. Some claims about like Picasso and Da Vinci being, wizard portraiteurs. Let's see. So there's a lot to go through, but I thought it might just be fun to like go through some of the known portraits. There's a lot, but instead of more details on portraits, it's just kind of fun.
I'm sure that lots of these will also be Wizards Unite portraits.
Yeah, so I'm going to skip a couple here and there,
yeah.
like for spoilers and different things. One claim is that Anne Boleyn has a portrait in the grand staircase near the second floor landing, which is quite fascinating. We know like Armando Dippet, the prior headmaster, he has a portrait in the headmaster's office, as well as some other headmasters, which appears to be tradition. There's some professors like Basil Franzak. He actually has 4 portraits in Hogwarts, in the headmaster's office, by the grand staircase, in the library, and by the dungeons, which I thought was kind of interesting, like having 4. The
Sorry,
bloody...
going back to the headmaster one, that's interesting because it made me think about, you know how there's like presidential portraits and like the president selects like who makes the portrait. Yeah. I was also thinking about like what in the Hogwarts headmaster's office, like what gets passed on. So like these portraits obviously seem like a thing that stay in there, but also like the Hogwarts pensive. And so like if there's, you know, like what other artifacts or magical things preserve memory, sort of.
Yes.
All right, sorry.
No, that's you should interrupt me. Bloody Baron has one. It has a portrait, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Near the potions classroom. Some people that I don't really know about. There's a portrait of Brutus Scrimgeour, a descendant of whom we'll learn about later. That apparently conceals a secret passage between the trophy room and the 4th floor. Circe, who is, I think, a famous witch. I can't remember exactly. But there's a lot. So let's see. Everard, we know about. That was a...
Fat Friar.
Yeah, the Fat Friar has one.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wouldn't expect ghosts to have portraits.
Right.
Like, you're still here. I don't know.
Right. And then, of course, the Fat Lady. These are clearly alphabetical. This is one that I like. The Lockhart in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office and classroom, but only during the 1992-1993 school year.
Yeah. You don't get to stay, sir.
Temporary. Gryffindor, of course, has one.
But that also brings up, though, that, like, I'm sorry if you said this already, like, people don't have to be dead. Well, we also have ghosts, too, but, like, you can have, like... But it, like you were saying, it's only like a limited motion of like what they can do.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure in my reading. I don't think I came across the question of whether if a portrait of somebody who then dies, does the portrait like become more magically imbued? Because it does seem like the portraits of dead people are maybe more important. I don't know. Hard to tell. Godric Gryffindor has some. Ravenclaw, yep. Merlin has one. Newt Scamander has one, apparently, in the headmaster's office. This is the claim. Nearly Headless Nick, which is kind of interesting as well. Phineas Black, which we'll learn about. There's some people playing Quidditch. So it's kind of fun because I like that it's such a long list because... especially visually in the movie, we really get a sense of like that there's just so many of them, right?
Yeah,
and so the idea of like them being able to move and like it's really quite fascinating. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I really did like the idea that the painter had some sort of influence over what the resulting magical portrait was like. I really liked that.
Yeah. Lots of things happen in this chapter. So like I feel like it was hard for me to identify like a major thing. I think after I started talking at you earlier today, I was like, oh, this is like, I think the major thing that's happening, although there's several major things that happen, but we kind of have we have like little vignettes and setups so there's a setup of Harry going to the fat lady, saying the password, going in, everyone's hyped, and then he leaves and she's like, why'd you wake me up then? But that setup, that moment it's supposed to come back later to cue you of like, oh, hey, remember the fat lady? We have this password, even though we've seen this multiple times already. But I think that in the course of that short period of time that something happened. So I kind of liked that, how that was introduced. And then we have this Quidditch inspirational pep talk from Oliver Wood, who's in his last year, and you're just like...
He even gets Fred and George on to be serious for a moment.
I kind of feel bad because he's like, we should have had the cup for these last 2 years.
We've been unstoppable since Harry's been here.
Oh my gosh. But he's just... That is setting up for something coming in the future.
Yeah, a little foreshadowing.
Yeah,
for sure,
but there's just like a lot that I feel like the setups are it's just like a little reminder of like, hey, remember these things. Like we know what Quidditch is. We know that there's passwords to get into the common room. So I'll just go into the fat lady real quick. So Next to nothing is known about the fat lady's early life or what her name was when she was alive. So we just call her the fat lady. She was presumably educated at Hogwarts and sorted into Gryffindor, which makes sense. She's in front of the common room. It's unknown when or how she died, but we know that she was a portrait in the 60s because and I didn't get like the exact reference moment to this, but Molly Pruitt, before she was Molly Weasley when she was a student, she returned to Gryffindor Tower at 4 o'clock in the morning after taking a late night stroll with her then boyfriend, Arthur Weasley, and they got a telling off from the fat lady. So she's at least been a portrait in front of this common room since the 60s when they were students. I thought that was a cute little story. And then I pulled a couple of the known past passwords for this Gryffindor Common Room. We talked about this, I think, in a trivia question we had on stream before, but the 1991-1992 school year, Caput Draconis, which is Latin for Dragon's Head, and Pig Snout. Those are... because I don't remember if we talked about how often they rotate the password.
Just kind of, yeah.
But I mean, for security purposes, I would imagine
they're about to rotate it more frequently. Yeah.
Neat. So we know those for 2. That's Harry's first year. In the second year, we only have one known password, Wattlebird. Harry's third year, we have Fortuna Major. That's the one that we currently have, like when Harry's like. He goes in, he leaves, and then they're trying to get in, but they can't find the fat lady at the end of the chapter. And then we have, I don't know, Flibbertigibbet, Odds Bodikins, Scurvy Cur. Those are going to be passwords that we'll encounter later this year.
Scurvy Cur.
Next year, we'll encounter some passwords. Balderdash, Banana Fritters, Fairy lights. There's not really like an obvious theme for me, but remember last book we talked about like the Slytherin common room, and what was the password? It was something like, was it Pure Blood or something? Yes. It was something like so. Yeah. I don't know the range of types of passwords that can exist.
One of my favorite things is when we find out the Ravenclaw situation, how to get into the Ravenclaw Tower, many books from now.
Yeah, so I thought those passwords, well, we have a couple more. We have Baubles and Mimbulus Mimbletonia, which apparently is the only one that Neville was ever able to remember. Poor Neville.
Is that in Hogwarts Wizards Unite? It is, right? Isn't it the like prickly...
plant
that we return?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Unless I'm mistaken, that's the one.
Because I think it's a transfiguration.
Kind of looks like
it transfigures a person.
Yeah, like kind of looks like
a cactus.
Like a cactus. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final passwords that are known in the series are in the 1996-97 year: abstinence, Dillygrout, and Quid Aegis. I don't know if I said that right, but it's Latin for "what are you doing," which I thought was an appropriate password, and tapeworm.
Tapeworm.
Yeah, those are just some passwords.
Did somebody sneak that one into the Wikipedia? No.
Who knows?
That's funny.
So we had the Quidditch, and then we have this discussion of Hogsmeade, which of course, poor Harold.
Yeah, I thought about doing more Hogsmeade stuff, and we can get into it, but there'll be later chapters to talk about it more. Yeah.
We also have when they come back. I believe this is when they come. Or wait, maybe not. There's some time between like I think they knew they were going to Hogsmeade on Halloween, so that's when everyone was kind of like excited about it. But then sometime between then and the actual Halloween. Oh yeah, because we have the date October 16th. Lavender's rabbit dies. Binky, little Binky.
Little Binks.
And it's really interesting the way that the scene is crafted with the dialogue of Hermione, because when I was reading it, I could feel that Hermione was trying to be delicate in what she was saying. It was a little less intense than the first day of divination class when she was just kind of like dismissive, whatever. And I think because Hermione is also pretty sensitive and knows like, okay, Lavender's crying, like this is her pet, but also wanting to offer what she calls a logical perspective on this, which is, you could argue, not comforting at all.
Yep.
But it is like, it made me think about like dynamics that I've encountered in real life and like not knowing what to do about, like,
this will likely not surprise you or any of our listeners. I'm 100% in Hermione's camp because it is not worth being comforted by a lie, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, especially the types of lies that we tell ourselves to get comfort. So, yeah I did like the fact, like, oh, it came as a surprise, then you couldn't have possibly been dreading it, right? That type of logical.
The bunny was a baby.
It's a baby, so
why would you be dreading it to die?
It wasn't even that day. She just found out that day. So
yes,
this is the whole point of the earlier one of like what a con woman looks like when it comes to Trelawney.
Yeah,
where she says things that are vague enough.
Yeah.
That like.
You make
if you want them to be true, you can make them be true. And if you think they're false, you won't even remember it because it's so vague, right? It's like...
Yeah. There's also...
But we know that Lavender and Parvati have been sort of obsessed with it. So they probably recorded this date and like, just wait, something bad is going to happen. Something bad is going to happen.
There's this detail where they kind of... I don't remember exactly how J.K. Rowling phrased it, but it was like... They went it was like they would come out of Trelawney's office like with their head held high, kind of. It's very
tut at Harry, like, oh, what a shame.
So like so many, we've talked about this before, but so many of like so many social issues in terms of the root can come down to like issues of superiority complexes. And so like this is unfortunate that something like this is being used in a way to be like, oh, but you're, those simpletons, like they just don't understand, they don't know, like we really can see, like we can see the future, we can like predict things or whatever.
I generally come down on the idea that humility is a pretty good virtue to have. I like that Dumbledore is humble, but arrogance, you bet you got to earn arrogance. I always think about Michael Jordan. Like, if you're going to be arrogant about winning basketball, you better be good at basketball. So, like, the arrogance about this type of thing is incredibly frustrating. And that is what I believe they project when they look at Harry like, oh, we know better than you. Like, what a shame. What a pity, that you're too close-minded to protect yourself from these terrible things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about just one of my things. I think a lot. I overthink social interactions. Like I try to choose my words wisely. But I think ultimately one of the messy things I come into is that I want people to, I don't know, embrace the things that they know or are good at or are specialized in. Like, that's great. But for me, like, it should not cross into a point where you make other people feel bad because they can't do those things. This is a little different, but like in a similar vein of like you can be, or what you just said, so you can be good at basketball, but like, do you need to like rub it in people's faces that you're better at them? Or
who do you say it to is, I think, also your point. I mean, if it's like other professional basketball players, then like it's a different dynamic.
Yeah. And
I think like this type of, it's very frustrating. I also picked up on, I did not remember that Ron did this discursive move with Lavender in front of Hermione of like, oh, she just doesn't care about, don't worry, Lavender, she just doesn't care about people's pets.
Okay, so
and I was like, oh, like here's the kindling.
Okay, that line stood out to me as well, and this is why I wrote down like the order of interactions that happened. I forgot to talk about Crookshanks and Scabbers. That happened before Lavender, and so that was a setup for this line, and we'll see that later on in the book, which I forget. Like, it's so in the background that I almost forgot because I went to go watch the movie scenes, and I was like just looking up stuff on YouTube, and then I found other scenes that I was like, oh yeah, that's this movie too, and so, or this book too, and so I almost forgot about how important all of these like little moments with Scabbers
Yeah,
gonna
it's
be.
like last book with Ginny.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She's really J.K. Rowling good at filling out a scene with what feels like erroneous detail,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually she's actually very economical with the space of her book, especially in the first three, at least, when they're not particularly long books.
Yeah.
But she packs a ton in there.
Right.
And it's because most details that seem superfluous pay off.
Yeah.
Or they're clear character, just to flesh out some more characters. Here's Fred and George saying something. Here's, Oliver saying something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Ginny in the first one, and all the Scabbers stuff in this one.
Right. Yeah, we didn't even, this chapter is about the fat lady, but we don't get to, it's only like the very end of this chapter. It's not the main focus of it.
No, it isn't. What about the Lupin Snape scene?
Yeah, okay, so I think this might be connected to what we're talking about. But first, in that scene, Harry and Lupin are chatting.
Mm-hmm.
Lupin is like, is there something worrying you? Harry says no, classic Harry. And then he's like, yes. Like, I was just like, oh, yay, Harry, go ahead, go for it.
Well, there's something, J.K. Rowling, again, taking advantage of something, which is that the Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers are, like, almost in sequence foils for each other, right? You got, like, bumbling, stumbling Quirrell, who winds up being Voldemort. And then you have Lockhart, who also is a bumblehead, but, like, it's a totally different twist. Mm-hmm. And then, like, now you have Lupin, who... It's like... Lupin is a combo of Hagrid and McGonagall, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he is welcoming and warm and...
Yeah.
But also keen...
Yeah.
And incisive when it comes to understanding people.
Yeah. I rewatched this scene with Harry and Lupin where they're talking about the Boggart, and I prefer the chapter. I don't know. There's something about the scene in the movie. So basically they're on like the bridge.
I remember it.
And Lupin just kind of monologues a bit, and right. It's not, it doesn't, well, first of all, like, there's no Snape coming in with this cauldron, and like, so right. I think that is important as well. But I really liked how, like, the feeling of Lupin in the book feels, it's recognizable in the movie, but it feels, at least from what I've seen in the movie up to this point, it feels slightly different. I think it's important that all the students love Defense Against the Dark Arts and, like, are raving about Lupin and all this, and, like, perhaps that's also, because even... Like, the times that Harry has said no or, like, shut down or not said anything before, it's like with Dumbledore. It's not even, like...
It's Dumbledore not that, is more aloof.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about this, like... Harry's relationship with Lupin starts on the train, and so there's this very, like, intense moment, and that's, like, basically the foundation of their relationship.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And I think
to see
also,
that.
like, Harry... I think he appreciates a lot about Lupin, because I think Lupin is maybe, now that I'm just talking, like, I hadn't prepped anything like this, but I think Lupin is maybe the best mirror for Harry that we've had in all of the stories. He's, like, a little shy. He's a little, at times, like, unsure of himself, but also, like, very sensitive. So he seems to be, like, empathic in the same type of way that Harry is. Mm-hmm. He also gets made fun of by Malfoy. But I also think, like, he is a reflection of the maturity that Harry is probably craving. Mm-hmm. Harry's probably been craving this type of maturity his entire life, right? Yeah. Like, this sense of, like, this is somebody who will watch out for me, but won't necessarily sugarcoat things. Mm-hmm. He told him straight up why he didn't let him face the Boggart. It wasn't a hide. Yeah. And then he was, it seems to be authentically curious about Harry's thinking about the Boggart, of like, yeah, I thought about Voldemort, but then I remembered the Dementor, and Lupin's kind of like, wow. And so I think the whole thing is kind of tied up in this idea of like Harry is outgrowing some of the ways that the adults around him are treating him like kids.
Yes.
Like
yeah.
he should be able to go to Hogsmeade, in his opinion at least.
Right.
Whereas I think last year he wouldn't have questioned it.
Right.
But like you get this because you see how he is split now, right? It's not like all third years can't go to Hogsmeade. It's that all third years can go to Hogsmeade except one. Yeah. And so you have this sort of like he's like getting tired of that thing, right? In the last one, he was kind of tired. He's been tired up for a while of the fame, but this is becoming more like he's getting tired of the treatment.
He's like, I'm a person.
Yeah, he is a person, right?
My name is Anakin.
Yeah.
No, but yeah,
a pilot, you know.
I think that also came out in the last chapter when we were talking about Neville and like what can happen to a person if you just treat. We've talked about this before. If you just treat kids as people, what can happen?
The first thing I think as a good teacher is to recognize kids' feelings as developed feelings. They're not. Yeah. They've had at this point 13 years of emotions. So like they've seen the range.
Right.
Maybe they even feel it quite acutely. It's not as muffled as I think adults try to earmuff themselves from their own emotions. So it's like. If you can see Neville in that last chapter actually settle down once Lupin acknowledges. I mean, the Boggart is, again, just such a plot device because it lets Lupin help the kids acknowledge that they have greatest fears. Yeah. So, like, it's not like they're kids, so they just don't have greatest fears.
Right.
They do. Yeah. And so, just like, and then here, like, this is now we get a one-on-one time with Harry talking about the same type of revelation, right? I mean, the idea that Harry is afraid of fear itself, big inference.
That was a jump, but
yeah.
okay.
Fear itself.
So I really, the scene with Snape coming in with the cauldron, we'll learn more about later, but it brought me flashbacks back to book 1 where Harry's just like, Snape is trying to murder Lupin. And I'm like, bro.
Well, another one.
Oh my gosh.
Another point for J.K. Rowling is like, she somehow finds this way of weaving the story so that you get both character and plot development at the same time. So you get to see, because I think it's another aspect of the maturity. Like Lupin is in that moment much more mature than Harry, right? Lupin takes it all in stride. He's like, it's very, like he is not, Lupin seems to not have the sort of grudge. As we go forward, Lupin is, in this scene, a foil for Snape. But then Snape himself has, at least from my eyes, but Harry doesn't quite give him this, another opportunity to grow, right? So we have this theme over and over again of like Snape kind of he does these sort of weird things. Like, and the more you learn about Snape, the more it's like, oh, well, okay, him and Lupin have some history here, but he's still doing this, even if he does it coldly. So that is the epitome of Snape, right? Yeah. Is the difference between like his actions and kind of his motivations and what do you how do you deal with somebody like Snape is kind of a key thing of the whole series.
Right.
But and Lupin here gives us one. I mean, I think we've only really seen a couple of people treat Snape like Snape probably he will definitely see he has a lot of baggage, and I think only 2 people really we've seen so far like treat Snape in a certain way, like Dumbledore and maybe McGonagall. Like everyone else is a little standoffish from him because he's standoffish. I mean, it just is, it's a brilliant scene. It's so short. It's like
there's actually pages. So I've been like focusing on like the setups of all these things, and the setup for Snape here is at the beginning of this chapter when Harry's like, or whoever, I don't know if it's Harry's voice or just like third person narrator voice, but like all of the kids love the Defense Against the Dark Arts. They love Lupin except for Malfoy. Snape has been like upset ever since the Boggart lesson, and
Neville.
Just like, and also kind of like
extra the rumors have flown, right?
But also the other detail that's listed in there is that any mention of Lupin's name, Snape kind of has this snarl. And so you're setting that up and then you have this scene with Harry, and you know that Harry has a contentious relationship with Snape, and so it's kind of like, as you're reading this, especially from the first time, you're like, oh yeah, like something, like, what is this? It seems completely reasonable, Harry's crazy, connection, and being like, Snape is trying to poison him.
Yeah.
But it really reminded me, so I've talked about watching Knives Out. I've watched it 3 times already because
yeah,
I'm I don't know, I was just studying it. So it made me question whether these stories are whodunit or following that sort of mystery type thing. It's not exactly, I wouldn't say that it's that structure, because whodunits are, for that genre of mystery, is typically there's a crime, it's typically a murder, and so you're going through different people's perspectives. But it is like it reminded me of showing perhaps similar scenes from different perspectives, or just the idea of perspective taking, and how if you paid attention to even the same detail but with a different framing, that you would come to a different conclusion. So I was just in this rabbit hole of that. But there's no like mystery, there's no clear mystery at this point, except for where is Sirius Black, or
what's the deal?
Yeah, so it's not like a specific who like, we know who it is, but we don't quite know like the full extent of the story.
But yes, I mean, the genre discussion is a great place. Do you have more?
No, I was just looking at another like type of mystery storytelling is the howdunit, or the how catch 'em. And so for that structure, what the crime is, and you're trying to like walk through like, okay, how did they do it, or to the point where like the result is like the criminal is caught or whatever.
Yeah.
But
they are clearly mysteries. Mm-hmm. And there are similarities and differences across the book so far of like what the type of the mystery is. Like the first one is sort of like, what's going on? I mean, you even get this like, who is Nicholas Flamel, like sub mystery going on. The second one is quite clearly like, what are these whispers that Harry is hearing, and like, what about the Chamber of Secrets?
I mean, it's a little bit like who opened the Chamber of Secrets, but that's not the start of the story. That's not the point, like the beginning.
It's clear
point of
none
the
of
story.
none of them are whodunit.
Yeah.
Because of the storytelling device, she doesn't go back in time very much. She doesn't hop time.
So that's another defining feature of the whodunit is you have two
start in the
timelines.
middle.
One is past timeline, so that's past leading up to the crime or the event, and then you have present timeline, where usually you are switching perspectives among different witnesses.
That's why the detective is such a cornerstone of the whodunit, because they're the ones who narrate the move, like back and forth. But here, like we sometimes get things like that. Yeah, like we got Hermione in book 2 with like, she gets frozen, but she still plays the plot device of like having the book page in her hand, right? Of like, oh, move back in time because she was frozen in time. So it's kind of useful that way. Yeah. But I love it. I mean, I think the more that I try to write and learn about these things myself, like the more I appreciate framing the Harry Potter books as mysteries. Quite distinct from like Lord of the Rings, which is a quest.
Hero's journey. Well, I mean, I guess you still kind of have like a journey, but it's the structure of it is what you
Hero's
said.
journey
Not a
is
quest,
the character arcs,
not a quest
maybe.
Where you have something like Harry has a clear goal. No,
that's
not. I mean, not here. And
later,
I guess,
maybe.
Yeah,
later,
I guess a vague later, but yeah, I agree.
It's just really useful because to me, as a budding writer, like what I am picking up on is some of the more subtle things that J.K. Rowling does in terms of, again, like she's so economical with her scenes and what she tries to accomplish. Yeah, it's interesting. And the reason why I kept talking about setup and then here's like what follows is because all of those setups are like framings for if it's supposed to cue your attention to something like the fat lady and like putting in a password, or if it's meant to like give you the tone of something of like Snape is really grumpy these days. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, it seems simple to say, but almost certainly to write this type of thing, you have to spiral between like what you are trying to set up, like the end, and then how you set it up. And like you kind of, I feel like she must have bounced back and forth of being like, okay, like I need this to happen later. Or like this is like, oh, wouldn't it be good if like this Lupin arc with him like being shabby and everything, like can we tie it in with Snape? And then she kind of repeatedly does that. Like who should be the clue giver of all these like Lupin clues? Oh, Snape would be most interesting, because they're good foils for each other, and it gives some sort of weird insight into them both. But anyway, yeah, good chapter.
The chapter ends with we have slash marks on the fat lady's portrait. Can't find her, and actually
Peeves.
in the book, Peeves is the one who reveals to Dumbledore and I guess everyone else that it's Sirius
In the
Black.
movie, it's Filch.
No, in the movie, it's the fat lady. They find her. So it's more of like, how the movies are more like comedy oriented.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like all the kids are there. Dumbledore comes up to the staircase, and then the portraits, I think, say like, oh, she ran over, blah, blah,
But
blah.
then Filch sees
And then Filch does see. Filch says she's right there.
Right.
And then the kids all run up the staircase. Dumbledore runs up, and then she like comes, but Filch doesn't say it's Sirius Black. He just says fat lady's there.
Right.
She is behind like a hippo or some animal and in camouflage, and she says, the man, whatever. She speaks kind
Eyes
of
like the
cryptically.
devil.
Yeah.
Yes,
Cryptically, and she says Sirius Black, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
secure the castle. That's
It's a
life.
fascinating one.
Yep.
So now we're getting down to it. Apparently, Sirius Black has been in the castle and attempted to get into the Gryffindor Common room.
Yep. And there's still so much more to be revealed in this book.
So
because
much more.
We have to come back to Hermione. We have to come back to Scabbers. We have to come back to
so much more.
Oh my
We are
gosh.
surrounded by things and people that are connected to Sirius Black, and we don't know.
I think the swirling that you said is a good thing because it does come back in waves, and it's kind of like, let's revisit this, and then at some point it like kind of tightens to like a point where it's like, all right, all of this.
Yeah, we know what the scene is already.
For a reason.
Yeah. All right.
All
Anything
right.
else?
Nope, that's all I have.
Okay. Juan's
ready.
ready.